My name is Hayden Christie. I'm a sports nutritionist that coaches rugby athletes, and welcome to this video on how I help Tehuia build an elite diet in my ProFuel coaching program. T is a first grade rugby union player that plays for Uni North's Owls in the John Dent Cup in Canberra. He has played at a rep level including for the New Zealand Heartland 15, Thames Valley Swamp Foxes and Brumbies development teams. I worked with T in ProFuel over 16 weeks from mid-January to mid-May. Some key objectives that T wanted to achieve from working with myself included gaining a better understanding of his optimal macronutrient intake to support improved body composition during a weight loss period, finding a repeatable meal planning system that required minimal time commitment each week, developing his knowledge of performance nutrition so he could manage his diet himself after coaching, increase his consistency and structure around game day eating, and have accountability to someone else so he was completely locked in with his diet heading into a really big season of rugby. With any athlete I work with in ProFuel, I coach them in a series of 3 phases: a foundation phase, a precision phase, and an optimization phase. The reason why I coach in phases is that it ensures we get the most important parts of a rugby athlete's diet correct before moving on to the smaller details. It also helps to prevent overwhelm and reduce confusion during the coaching process. Finally, I found that by working through phases, we are able to create dietary change which is a lot more sustainable, as you aren't overloaded with information for too many things at once. The first phase of the program is the foundation phase, where we focus on mastering the basics of a rugby athlete's diet. For T, the key focuses in the foundation phase were getting clarity around his exact macronutrient needs, finding a repeatable meal planning system that was easy to organize and required minimal time commitment each week, and making sure he had a healthy and balanced diet that was giving his body what it needed to recover, adapt, and withstand the stress of being a busy rugby athlete. Way too many rugby players have body composition goals, but just completely guess when it comes to their macronutrient intake. If you're a serious athlete wanting to improve your body composition, guessing isn't good enough. T had a rough idea of how much protein, carbs, and calories he needed each day, but it wasn't calculated precisely. In the first week of the program, we removed all the guesswork from his macronutrient intake and had clear targets for each of his days. The best thing about this is when you have consistent macronutrient intake targets, you can make predictable changes to an athlete's diet over time, based on how their weight and body composition track. Without having targets and clearly calculating food intake, you're completely lost as to how to make changes over time. The result of this is that T was able to lose body fat while maintaining his muscle mass during a busy pre-season period. Another key thing I work on with rugby athletes within the foundation phase of the program is working out how we can best organize their diet and food so you can stay very consistent week to week. This means assessing things like when they have time to cook, the serving sizes that their recipes should be, providing clear and simple recipes that suit their work and life schedule, and a supermarket list so they know exactly what they need to buy for a full week of food. If your diet feels like a constant chore, I'm not doing my job well. These simple changes save time each week, which is really important as most of the athletes I work with are working full-time as well, so having any spare time is rare. For T, the main benefits of this is that he didn't have to think about the organizational side of the diet. He just needed to follow the plan, recipes, and lists provided. Another key focus of the foundation phase is making sure an athlete has a healthy and well-balanced overall diet that meets all of their micronutrient needs. It's about nailing the fundamentals. Things like making sure an athlete is consuming a lot of whole grains, making sure they're getting fruit and vegetables in sufficient quantities, and having a good intake of healthy fats and anti-inflammatory foods. Healthy fats are one thing I notice a lot of rugby players lack, and that was something we worked on with T. Always aiming to include foods like salmon and avocado a couple times per week to increase his omega-3 intake. It's easy for rugby athletes to forget the health aspect of their diet when they're so focused on performance fueling. But having a balanced diet that is dense in micronutrients underpins every adaptation we are trying to achieve by improving your diet. Once you nail the health aspect, performance tends to take care of itself. At the end of the first phase, once we have basics of the diet nailed, we move into the precision phase, which is where we focused on more advanced performance nutrition topics. For T, this meant focusing on things like dialing in his food timing, reviewing and developing a personalized game day plan, and introducing increased periodization of his diet across the training week. Whenever I work with an athlete, I want to have an understanding of their exact training and work schedule on every single day so I can build the meal plan to have very precise timing guidance around every meal and snack. Once the foundation of a diet is there, timing is a key lever that we can pull to improve the overall effectiveness of an athlete's diet. Some key things I'll always look for with food timing would be protein evenly distributed across the day, food being consumed relatively soon after exercise sessions, and the time distance that higher GI carb snacks are consumed in relation to training. For T, the afternoon period was very inconsistent with his fueling. The problem with inconsistency in the afternoon is that then we can have an 8 to 9 hour period between the lunch and dinner meal where there is a lack of quality nutrients going in. As an athlete, we always want to avoid large gaps in your day with minimal food intake. The adjustment we made was to have between 2 and 4 afternoon snacks for T every day, timed appropriately around his afternoon sessions to avoid this big gap and ensure he hits every evening session well fueled and energized. It also prevented him from getting home from his evening training sessions absolutely starving. Game day is a point of confusion for many rugby athletes, and that's something I have a massive focus on with every ProFuel client in the precision phase. For T, he was often confused on how to get in enough fuel on game day without feeling heavy. What I often see here, as was the case with T, was that quite a lot of his game day meals in the past had been a little high in protein and fat. Eating meals high in fat and protein on game day slows down digestion, which can leave you feeling heavy and sluggish when it's time to play. For that final pre-game meal, ideally eaten about 3.5 hours before kickoff, I prefer to keep fat to an absolute minimum and keep protein to a moderate level. For T, an option that worked really well was having sushi as his pre-game meal. High in carbs, low in fat, moderate protein, and very easy to digest. Game day is always about balancing the art and the science. Everyone has specific things they like doing on game day, and it's about blending together the scientific principles that promote proper fueling with the individual preferences of an athlete. Another thing I like to introduce more in the precision phase, particularly when an athlete's in a moderate calorie deficit, is increased periodization of the diet across the training week. Diet periodization is just a fancy way of saying matching your food to your physical output. Instead of eating the exact same amount of calories and carbs every single day, you change your nutrient intake based on how hard you are training on any given day. Think of it as turning the fuel tap up or down depending on what your body actually needs to do that day. The interesting thing with T was that before coaching, he was actually doing the reverse of what you want as an athlete, in that he was often eating more on his rest days and less on his busier training days. This is something we want to avoid when we are trying to keep calories controlled to support weight loss. We want to have a bias of calories towards the days where more energy is expended. This helps to promote improved training performance and allows the maintenance of a calorie deficit to be easier because athletes tend to be less hungry on their rest days. Following the end of the precision phase, we move on to the optimization phase, where we start to focus on the smaller details of an athlete's diet and assess where we can get those extra 1% gains to best set an athlete up for continued success. Big thing I want to strive for with the athletes that I work with is them having confidence and maintaining a decent diet in changing environments. An environment that comes up a lot is that of a holiday. For many athletes who I work with, holidays can become slightly stressful as they don't want to undo all the progress that they've made. When I work with an athlete and they go on holiday, it's about helping them understand how they can best balance having a good diet while still being able to really enjoy themselves while they're away. For T, the holiday he went on was a week-long holiday to the islands to celebrate a friend's wedding. The week before T went on holiday, I want to assess things like what are the main events he has while he's there, what kind of food will be provided at the accommodation, and how much flexibility he wants to have during the holiday. Once I have a good understanding of those factors, I can create guidelines that ensure T is able to maintain some consistency with his diet while still being able to enjoy the time with friends. Another big thing we often focus on in the optimization phase is supplements. A great way to view supplements is as the icing on top of the cake, where the cake is a great balanced overall diet. Supplements can be a great investment to get those extra 1% gains. 6 to 7 games into his season, T was pretty worn down, as he'd been playing a lot of 80-minute games. On top of supplements like protein powder and creatine, the key other supplements I recommended to T were options that could reduce inflammation, reduce muscle soreness, and support recovery during a stressful in-season period. I provide specific options around exactly what brand I recommend, how they should be taken, and educate the athlete on why they are the best investments for their individual. This means that an athlete isn't wasting money on useless supplements that aren't providing any benefit, and they have full clarity around what they should be taking. ProFuel has a couple of key features that support the success of the athletes that I work with. Of course, the meal planning advice underpins everything we do, but on top of that, athletes have 24/7 instant messaging access to me, coaching calls every 4 weeks, and access to my weekly accountability system. A massive complaint I hear from a lot of rugby athletes when they've worked with other coaches is that they don't have consistent access and communication with their nutritionist. That is why with every athlete I work with, they have full-time instant messaging access to me so they can message me whenever they need support or have questions. This is particularly useful for athletes like T when they go on holiday and need more comprehensive support in random environments. It's also useful as an athlete's weekly schedule often changes week to week, whether that be changing training schedules, different work shifts, or managing events like an injury. This is a key reason why I like having instant messaging access to ProFuel athletes, as I want to be able to make adjustments on the go. Coaching calls are a massive part of the program, and we have these every 4 weeks throughout coaching. The great thing about coaching calls is it gives you the opportunity to provide me more in-depth feedback on how things are going, so we can make continual improvements to your plan. Also, it's another great educational opportunity, as I can really help you understand the reasoning behind any changes we've made to your diet. Throughout the program, I also have a weekly accountability system. A lot of athletes have a decent diet before starting coaching, but sometimes they feel that a lack of accountability results in their standards slipping a little too often. A really common way I like to maintain accountability throughout a program is to get athletes to complete a food journal once per week. With the food journal, an athlete uploads photos of all their meals and snacks on a single day, so I can see one full day of eating per week. This is really useful to be able to provide feedback to an athlete and support them if they're ever going off track. When I asked T to review the program, he said, "The program's been a game changer for fueling my body to perform. With a busy work and training schedule, it took away the stress and decision fatigue around food. When you're putting in work on the field, it's good knowing recovery, performance, and growth are covered. Having a guided plan gave me confidence walking into game day, knowing my body was ready. Hayden constantly adjusted the plan to make sure it matched exactly what I needed to perform at my best." The consistent check-ins were huge for accountability and adjustments. Having access to feedback and support cut down the guesswork and made the process simple. The meal planning support was unreal too. Grocery shopping became easy with preloaded lists and practical guidance. What starts as a plan becomes sustainable habits and education around fueling properly, with no cookie-cutter diets. Hayden knows his craft, genuinely wants the best for you, and is approachable throughout the process. I'd 100% recommend ProFuel to aspiring players. The details matter. Nail those and the results will follow. If you're a rugby athlete and you'd like to learn more about ProFuel, DM me Elite and I'll send you all the details on the program.